Melissa Etheridge, yes, that Melissa Etheridge, joins us as she has an offering in the cannabis space. Does a great job of paralleling the LGBT rights and gay rights conversations with the cannabis conversation. So, didn't have a ton of time, but very much appreciated Melissa Etheridge. All right, so it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Melissa Etheridge. Melissa, thanks so much for giving us a couple minutes.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate your work, and it's my pleasure being here.
Absolutely. So I appreciate your work as well. Thank you so much for the music throughout the years.
My pleasure. That's always been my pleasure.
That's it. So, here's what I'd love to cover is exactly that, the music, and then basically the whole time span through the years, then what led you to the no label. But let's quickly make sure that we highlight that right up front so folks know what you're doing now. Wine and cannabis, huh?
Yeah, it's an old tradition that goes back thousands of years. They've been putting wine and herbal infusions. They've been putting cannabis and herbal infusions in wine since biblical times. The scholars from back then will tell you, oh yeah, that was something that was very common.
Right.
So this is not a new thing, and in the past 100 years, vineyards have been doing them on the side for personal, enjoyment. And I started working with a dispensary a couple years ago, and this was something that was on the side. And I said, you guys, we should bring this to market. This is kind of crazy good. So that sort of led me where we are now.
All right. And so let's go all the way back. Folks are certainly fans, so we'd love to hear it. I think you're from Kansas, am I right?
You are correct. Leavenworth, Kansas, born and raised.
Okay. And so, how laid back and left wing was it there in Leavenworth, Kansas growing up?
Not very. It was the funny thing about Kansas is it's not completely conservative, but it's not completely liberal. It's very much where its geography leads it. It's very central. It's not southern. It's not northern. It's not eastern, and it's not western.
Right.
It's midwestern. It's right there in the middle, and I found it to be a place where you kind of had both. I mean, it was even reflected in my family.
Yeah.
My father was Republican and my mother was Democrat, and I kind of got both of these thoughts in my household. So I grew up kind of in the middle.
All right. So hit the ground running as a centrist, if you will. How quickly did music become something that you knew that you wanted to do?
Oh, it was a crazy thought and dream of mine from the very, very beginning, from childhood. I mean, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s when it was all about music, when it was, what records are you playing? It was about my little Philco 45 record player, and then we got the big stereo system, and that was exciting. And the radio, and my sister was older than me, and she had her records she listened to. My parents had an interesting collection. And then finally, when I was 8 years old, my father brought a guitar home. It was for my sister, but I begged and pleaded and cried until they let me take lessons, and I just never looked back.
That's fantastic. And what was some of the early inspirations? I mean, a really little kid, you're 8 years old, but what got you?
Well, the beautiful thing was I had this one radio station, on the AM station, WHB, in Kansas City, that played everything.
Yeah.
It was because it was the only station. It played. You could hear, bubblegum music. You could hear Tommy James and the Shondells. Then you could hear Tammy Wynette. Then you could hear Marvin Gaye. Then you could hear Led Zeppelin.
Right.
It was
right.
like it crossed all about. That's what top 40 radio used to be. It was the top 40 of all the songs of all the genres. And so I got this constant influx of all those artists. And everyone I've named was a huge influence on me.
That's fantastic. And if I'm doing my math right, just because you are a public figure, I feel like we're allowed to know this. If you're 8, I think that was the summer of 1969.
Yeah.
They're doing Woodstock, and you're taking your first guitar lesson, right?
Yes, and I start getting these, images from Woodstock and music and how music's bringing people together and this love and this. It's an amazing time turning into the '70s, which was, the golden age of rock and roll.
Sure.
Not the golden, but the classic age. You get this amazing rock and roll music. So I'm just caught up in all of that.
Yeah. And when did you kind of have your first band, or your first? When did you find your voice? Let's say that.
Well, it worked out. I would do a lot of music in school, but then there was also a talent show when I was 11 years old at the Plaza, the Leavenworth Plaza. It was the very small mall we had. And from there, the guy put together a variety show. And from there, I was introduced to a country band. We called them country western bands back then. And, they said, hey, come sing with us. We're playing the Parents Without Partners dance at the Knights of Columbus sort of thing. And, come sing from 9 to 10. And my dad came with me. I was 11, almost 12. And he came with me, and I started singing. I'd get up and I'd sing the, Tammy Wynette, Loretta Lynn songs. And then I'd go home. And then after a while, I became a member of that band, and I would play all 3 or 4 hours with them. And it was very unusual because I was 12 and 13. But then I started playing in all these bands.
Yeah.
And I got this great education in music and performing by playing on the weekends all through my, junior high and high school years.
Well, when you were 12, 13, did you already have that voice that we know, that big Melissa Etheridge voice?
Oh, it was very unrefined.
Okay.
It was, I'll listen to, I have little recordings of me from back then, and it's almost my voice is too big for my young body. It's almost, I remember one of the choir directors said, I didn't quite know where to put you. I just put you in the back because your voice was so strange.
That's, we'll just put her back there. People will hear. They definitely will hear, right?
Yes, indeed.
All right. So when did the record label people start coming around? When did that all take place?
Oh, well, when I graduated high school, my parents really understood that I was only going to do music. And so they sent me to Berklee College of Music for a couple semesters. I didn't finish the second semester. Okay. I started playing in restaurants, and because I knew how to play songs and make a living, and to do that. So I started doing that 4 or 5 nights a week, made up enough money. I went back to Kansas for a summer and made some more money, and then I got out to Los Angeles, and that's where now it's 1982. Right. Very different than the 70s. I thought LA was going to be filled with the Eagles and Linda Ronstadt and Fleetwood Mac and all these great people that by the time I got there in the 80s, it was now spandex and hair bands, and I was a little frightened. And I thought, and all my money's going away. I'm like, oh my God. And nobody plays to make money in LA. They pay to play. It's this crazy situation. So what happens is, personally, I start visiting some women's bars around LA, and I find one that has a piano in it. And I say, hey, do you have entertainment? And well, you want to try out? So I just auditioned, and I created this position before the disco. I would play from 5 to 9. So I started making money. Right. So I get, so I'm in Long Beach now and playing a couple bars, like one in Pasadena, one in Long Beach. And there's not a whole lot of record company people dropping in on lesbian bars in Long Beach. They're just not a big draw for that.
Right.
So it took a long time. It took 5 years of me playing. And finally, my first break came when some girls that played soccer with a woman whose husband was in the music business, and he ended up being my manager for 30 years. He came into the bar and saw me and was like, wow, and signed me, to represent me. Then spent, years bringing record people in there, and whatever issues they had with the gay part, who knows? And I wasn't, you didn't hear my music on the radio at that time, so it wasn't an easy sell. So it was finally Chris Blackwell of Island Records who came in and saw me and went, well, and he'll tell you now, he goes, I don't know why no one else had signed you. I'm just shocked that you were there.
Right.
So he signed me, and that's when it started. It was 1988. I finally released my first album.
Okay, and fantastic. And you kind of just talked about it, but you know, as far as gender equality, to say the least, or sexual identity, it was a very different time in the 1980s than it is in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say?
Oh, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, so that's fantastic that you get signed. You release your first album, and first album goes well. Second album goes pretty well too. You know, what was it like to kind of have so much success early and then just have this gigantic success?
That, you know, I really love how my career happened because it enabled me to grow with it. I didn't get it all at once and kind of get crazy. I was able to have 3 albums of, you know, medium success. Like, okay, I was playing, I was making a living. People who knew music knew who I was. I was on, you know, rock and roll radio. It was nice. And then when the 4th album came, bam, and I was already 33 at that point, and I can't imagine the success I had with my 4th album. I can't imagine having that. You know, I look at these young people now who were 19, 20 years old with this, you know, incredible success, and I think, wow, that's got to be tough. That's got to be really hard.
Yeah. No, it's almost better that you kind of were able to develop behind the piano there in that bar.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, indeed. Develop. Now I can get up in front of, you know, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and I have the chops, I have the practice, I know what I'm doing, I can entertain, and you know, I'm very proud of the fact that that's one of my hallmarks, is that people know that they get a good live show when they come and see me.
And speaking of that, when I hear your name, the song "I'm the Only One" starts playing. Just so you know. So
good. Yeah. It's a little mind bomb I planted in there. And
that's it.
Nice.
So we've got so much to cover, and it feels like I'm going quickly. But you have this tremendous success, and then you get diagnosed. Take us through the emotional highs and unbelievable lows of those two things that essentially happen closely.
Yeah, I achieved all this amazing success in the 90s, and then at the end of the 90s, I not only had I just had 2 children, which is an incredible thing, an incredible life change, but also then my relationship started breaking apart, and that was devastating because I felt I had, you know, was letting a whole community down, and I just had so many, you know, thoughts about that, and so I was coming out of that into the turn of the century, into the 2000. And I was, you know, the music industry was changing. Everything felt really strange to me. And I was starting to question, you know, what am I doing? I don't want to play this game. I all of a sudden find myself competing against, you know, Britney Spears and NSYNC, and like this is not the game I was in to play.
Yeah, that's a weird competition right there.
Yeah. And I was feeling very strange. And then I even looked up to the heavens one night and went, really, what do you want from me? What am I doing here? And the next morning I discovered a lump on my on my breast, and was like, okay, that's not what I meant.
Right.
You know, but you know, all of a sudden I'm on a completely different journey. And it was one of, of awakening.
Yeah.
And so the cancer diagnosis, then I basically let my whole life just wash over me like a wave and go away. And it was the first time in decades that I had just kept myself alone. And then going through the treatment of this, the recommended, you know, chemotherapy, they said they could do dose stents because I didn't have to work. I could just stay home. And which is like, you know, double, triple whammy chemo. Let's take you as close to death as possible. Right. I still don't understand the science behind it, but okay, whatever. And it was then that, you know, leaving the place when I got my first chemo, them saying, okay, here's a steroid for this, here's a pain reliever for that, here's the, you're going to be constipated because the pain reliever, so here's the medicine for that. And then I had 5 pills, and I'm like, are you crazy? And you're putting, toxic chemo in me. And that's when my dear friend David Crosby, and father of my 2 oldest children, he said, look, you've got to look up medicinal marijuana, cannabis. You got to do that. My friends say that that's the only thing to do. And so I didn't even take those pills. I put them down, and I went for relief in the cannabis.
I love that David Crosby is the person that kind of brought you through. And I was going to bring up that Rolling Stone cover that I remember to this day. But that is fantastic. And take us through 2005 Grammys. Big song, Piece of My Heart. You, not necessarily with any hair, kind of, as they say in the parlance of our times, crushed it.
Well, that song that's one I've been playing for years in the bars, right? I know that. I can sing that song in my sleep, and I love that song, and I love Janis Joplin. And when I got the ask to do it, I was still, in the middle of chemo, and I thought, oh God, how am I going to do this? But I did not want anyone. I would be just sick to my stomach if I saw anyone else singing it. So I just said, yes, I'll be there. I said, I'll be bald, but I'll be there. And I indeed was bald. And it was a personal triumph for me. It was a personal issue for me, the whole thing. And then realizing afterwards, the days and the weeks and now the years that have gone by, the people still come up and mention that performance to me. It really was a paradigm changer, and I'm appreciative to be a part of that.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and be selfish. Why not? I'm the one that's on the phone with you. You have educated me through the years on a lot, on sexuality, on cancer, and now you're helping here with cannabis. So you found cannabis about 10 years ago. The medicinal value of it. Take us through, you did mention, you were at the dispensary and we kind of have to make this happen. Let's talk about the brand. How did you put this all together?
Well, when I 10 years ago, then, went through this and realized, gosh, the cannabis is just something that brings me to normal. I can eat, I can tolerate this, the damage that this medicine is doing to me. I can tolerate it through the cannabis. I realized, this has to be, this sort of relief has to be available, and it's so misunderstood. And I started to really see the battle that was in front, and it reminded me very much of the LGBT battle, and it reminded me of how people were kind of in the closet about smoking, and you'd say well, anything about cannabis, and they just kind of giggle, and I'm like, wow, this is a really funny thing that everyone's like, oh, well, we do it, we just don't talk about it. It's it's don't ask, don't tell. And I said, this is a crazy sort of thing. And so I started looking into it, and found some ladies found me that have a dispensary in Santa Cruz, and about 4 or 5 years ago, started getting more and more involved in that. And I've just I now see the awakening of our society to plant medicine and its benefits, and how we sort of have been sold a phony bill of fear where it's involved.
Yeah, completely and totally. How many batches did it take to kind of make the product kind of come together in a place where it's gotten some pretty positive reviews?
Oh, for the cannabis wine?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that one, it has been very successful for quite a while. It went from, we're just doing 1 barrel for fun, to, hey, let's do 5 barrels and box those up, and slowly. I mean, the funny thing was, last year or about a year and a half ago, I forget. Yeah, it was about a year and a half ago. I actually mentioned Cannabis Wine, and it just blew up.
Right.
It was so, I was like, wow, this is really crazy. And, the funny thing is, I am regulated right now by, federal and state law. Uh-huh. And so I'm confined right now to selling it just through the dispensary to, registered cannabis patients in California.
Exactly.
But believe me, there are lawyers and people as we speak working to bring this, because it's a unique product that is, you really have to experience it to understand it. So I'm really looking forward to bringing it to people on a larger level. Soon.
Well, I can't wait to make it out to California to try some myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, what have you learned, along the way here? You mentioned the LGBT fight, and then now kind of this, the cannabis thing. We certainly do draw parallels between, gay marriage and how that now is, no longer
Mm-hmm.
a problem. And then this industry kind of having prohibition, and you kind of spoke to that. I don't think you used the word prohibition, but the parallels are thick, are they not?
They are unbelievably so, where what it's going to take is for people to come out, for people to let other people know in their family, in their workplace, at home, on their block, that they are at school. With, even because people get nuts that what about the children, right. that somehow it's going to lead people on this horrible dark road. And that's the deep held belief that we are dealing mm-hmm. with, sort of like, but that's also homosexuality. It was like, great, but don't do it around the children, right. Because they can be somehow affected and hurt by this. And so you're dealing with these deep, dark fears that the only thing that can get through it is constant showing of the opposite, of normalization, of helping, of positive, of families, of or communities that are thriving because of this, and so that's so much like it. And then just the laws, that it's a human right, it is a civil right. It is a civil right for us to explore our consciousness and for us to find the medicine that we desire. That is a civil right. And you really have to look at that. And it might take something like that, and it might go all the way to the Supreme Court to decide that about plant medicines, that this is a civil right that we have to explore our own consciousness.
There you go. And I'm looking forward to the potential of celebrating that whatever decision it is, but that decision, just as we were able to celebrate a few months ago.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So again, we don't have a ton of time because it turns out Melissa Etheridge is a busy person. So I do have 3 final questions for you. I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll ask you to answer mm-hmm. them in order. The first question is, what has most surprised you in cannabis? The second question is, what has most surprised you in life? And then the third question, mm-hmm. which we already might know the answer to, but on the soundtrack of Melissa Etheridge's life, what is one song that must be on that soundtrack? So first things first, what has most surprised you in cannabis?
Oh, I think I was even surprised myself of the far-reaching healing capabilities of cannabis. I mean, I too was one of those people that were like, oh yeah, this is something fun to do, and I know it's harmless, basically, but I really don't know much about it. But I was surprised at the medicinal qualities, just how much, and that was surprising.
To be able to kind of put those pills aside from the chemotherapy and find solace with cannabis as medicine, as a patient, I would imagine unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a big, beautiful gift, actually.
Yeah. And so, what has most surprised you in life, Melissa Etheridge?
Oh, that it just keeps unfolding, that you never get it done, ever. It's just, you can reach that point that you always wanted to get to, and then when you're there, all of a sudden, it's not quite, oh, wait a minute, but there's that other thing, that there's always that goal in front of you, and it just never stops. I love life.
I love life too. To that end, if I'll take the opportunity. If your friend David Crosby would like to talk to me about cannabis, we would love to have him. Which brings me to my final question. On the soundtrack of your life, what is one song, one track that must be there?
Oh, wow. Probably Bruce Springsteen's Jungle Land.
Oh, wow.
I think that's the song that the the beautiful picture that it paints, that rock and roll picture, and the classic operatic style of the whole thing, the feeling that it gives me is the feeling of my life. And I would have to say that's the song.
That is fantastic. I don't know if anybody would have pegged you for a Bruce fan, but there you are, right?
Huge Bruce fan, you bet.
Melissa Etheridge, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with the brand. And we look forward to the potential of talking to you again when you're nationwide. How about that?
How about that? I appreciate it very much, and I will. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right. Bye.
And so there you have Melissa Etheridge, who seems to be a genuinely good person. Either she's putting on a fantastic act, or that's just who she is. So, again, very much appreciated the parallels Melissa was able to draw, and obviously the perfect person to kind of draw those parallels. Melissa Etheridge.